Back. Now we continue debating about how far we've come 25 years into our democracy. Young people make up the largest part of our population, yet youth involvement in the democratic process isn't growing. So up next, we're speaking to Professor Henning Melber from the University of Pretoria, social activist Adolph Mokonyama, as well as author Rekgotsofetse Chikane. Rekgotsofetse wrote a book titled Breaking a Rainbow, Building a Nation. So we're going to be getting insights from those young people. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight this evening. Rekgotsofetse, let's start off with you. So you believe that the Rainbow Nation is a complete farce, or the rhetoric behind Rainbow Nation is a complete farce. Tell me why.
So I think the metaphor of the Rainbow Nation is actually the perfect metaphor to explain the country, right? So when you think about a rainbow, it is these 7 colors that run in parallel with each other into infinity, right? And in that sense, that explains South Africa. It's the idea that we were told that we are united in our diversity without ever recognizing what makes us different. We run in parallel with each other, and the only places of true integration is always that white hue in between them, almost as if when we really integrate, it has to be on the terms of the whiteness of this country, not necessarily white people per se. And that's why I think the Rainbow Nation, in its metaphor, is actually quite damaging for the country. And we should start thinking about a way of thinking about the country that is, we don't want to just be united in our diversity. We want to truly recognize what makes us different. And in order to do that, you have to have an honest conversation with someone who is not the same color as you, who is not the same ethnicity as you, and really try and recognize what makes them different from you.
Would you say that our democracy is maturing, Adolph, or would you say that we are actually moving backward with the amount of opportunities that have been given? And this is just taking social media into context. I mean, you guys are in your 20s, so Professor, you and me probably will be thinking a little bit differently about social media, but we've seen how social media goes up in a complete uproar in terms of some of the issues that are raised, how it's almost indicative of a democracy that is, though it is there, but are the people emotionally maturing so that they can embrace this 25 years and even the next 25 years?
Yeah, you'll remember that a lot of people are not happy. Some of them, they will be saying that with this democracy, they are not benefiting. We as young people, we are not benefiting from this democracy. It only benefits those who are rich. The poor one will stay poor forever because there's nothing that is happening towards us.
So, Professor, I'm going to bring you into this. I've got 2 young gentlemen, and I'm even going to go in with their color. They've got 2 young black gentlemen speaking about this issue around the Rainbow Nation, speaking about issues around equality. In your perspective, I mean, 25 years into our democracy, are we really getting to the promised land, or do we seem to be more racially divided and, as statistics will point out, one of the most unequal countries in the world, even though we're 25 years late?
I fully understand the frustration expressed, and it contrasts sharply with the euphoria, the unjustified euphoria 25 years ago, which is claimed to be celebrated. But after 25 years, I think the sobering realities have kicked in, and with half of the youth unemployed, with half of the population living in continued poverty, the civic freedoms which the Constitution has enshrined do not match the expectations, the rightly so existing expectations, when the people casted their vote 25 years ago. And I do understand that the Rainbow Nation turned into a project which cultivates identity politics, but not in contrast to that unity in diversity. And while there is, for example, to celebrate or at least to welcome that we have the opportunity to have these exchanges today without a fear of repressions, it's a very modest achievement compared with all the failures when we take stock of the last 25 years.
And I mean, Rekgotsofetse, just bringing you into this, I have to ask about the role of government, because we seem to have a very savior-oriented mentality when it comes to government. Was government put in place, and a democratic dispensation put in place, so that it could, A, facilitate a democratic path and make access for individuals that were previously marginalized? Or are we, especially as young people, looking to government too much to provide answers, which unfortunately they do not have the capacity to provide, but because they are politicians themselves, they're selling their own rhetoric of we can save you all if you just put the X on the ballot paper.
Yeah, I think that is the case, but I will give government credit, right?
Yeah.
They have done a lot for the country over the past 25 years, but that a lot must be prefaced with the idea that it was from a very low base. It wasn't as if the apartheid government gave the new democratic dispensation a very firm foundation to kind of work off of, right? So we've done a lot since then. The question that a lot of people should be asking now is, we no longer want to use apartheid as our baseline, as our base figure to say we've now moved from this point. We want to look at how our society is built currently, and this is what young people are really asking for. We're looking at our living conditions currently as we live, and we want to use this as our base to see how do we improve from this point. Don't tell us about how many houses you've built over the past 25 years. Tell us about how you're going to ensure that I get from matric to my university education and enable me to get a job. You don't have to give me a job, but create the environment for me to be able to find a job on my own. And I think that's the challenge that government has. The savior complex is the idea that government has to do everything for the people, whereas government should really be trying to create an environment that enables young people to be the best that they can be before even just throwing a job at them.
Well, on the other side of it, so does that mean that Adolph, you as young people get irritated or despondent when you hear any politician saying the reason why we have the unemployment rate that we've got right now is because we're still trying to deal with the injustices of the past, or the reason why you do not have electricities and there's load shedding is because we're still addressing the apartheid regime. So that does not resonate with you as a young person?
No, it doesn't resonate with me as a young person, because you remember that they made a lot of promises. Look at the unemployment rate for youth. It's too high. And then they've been making promises, and then there's nothing that they are delivering. For instance, if you are someone who's in grade 12 and going to university, they're saying free education, but there's no free education. No one is benefiting from this free education. It's not even yet implemented. Check up those kids who are in rural areas. They are not benefiting from this free education, so we are not free.
So then what if the politician says the reason why they're not benefiting from this free education is because during apartheid, they've had a whole lot of strides to get over, and there was an inequality and an unequal base at which they have to overcome, and as a result of that, all you are doing right now is reaping the ripple effects of such a dispensation?
You know, our government must not promise us what they are not going to deliver. You will remember that one thing that we as young people, we need to come together and stand together to say, this is what we want. The government must make sure that they are providing with what we want as young people.
And then for you, Professor, I mean, when we're talking about the inequality that continues to persist, would you say that the reason, the inequality or the level of inequality in the country is the reason why we perhaps are more divided now than maybe in a long time in this country?
Yes, and let's remember for a moment, looking back, what we witnessed was a pact among elites. It was an old elite transferring political power to a new dispensation, which then joined the old elite with new elite politics. And I think from the point of view of the youth, and I, of course, can't speak on their behalf, but from their point, I would assume you feel betrayed, because what we witnessed in South Africa and in other countries in Southern Africa was a transfer of power under controlled change, leading to changed control. And South Africa today is as unequal as it was before. Wealth is still monopolized in the hand of a few, only that apartheid is gone, but the structural injustices are the same. And it's kind of hypocritical of the new elite to put the blame on apartheid. It's not any longer the blame on apartheid. How much longer does the new political elite, which also benefits economically, want to put the blame on apartheid? The current president, who is welcomed as a positive contrast to the previous one, has amassed $400 million since 25 years. Now, if I compare that with the people living in the shacks, in the rural areas, in the townships, battling on a daily basis for sheer survival, why should they not be frustrated?
I think when it comes to issues around voting, and I have to ask you this because, less than literally it's about less than 2 weeks till you vote. Are you two gentlemen going to be voting at the elections? Why? Why not? And what are your thoughts towards the political climate of our country? I genuinely want to know what you think about the politics in our country. Let's start off with you.
Yeah, I'm definitely voting. 100%. I voted every single time that I've had the opportunity because it's a moral responsibility. And I think young people, moreover than anyone else, considering that our generation is one of the most marginalized generations in this country, the onus is on us to say that we have a higher responsibility to take ownership of the future of this country by voting. Now, the problem is we live in a society where we want this instant gratification of sorts, and the idea that I must vote now and then wait 5 years is a hard pill to swallow for someone who doesn't have what they need right now. So it's not just about I'm going to cast my vote myself personally. It's about the idea of how do I then get involved even more between now and the next election to ensure that whatever promise, however big it might be, I will force them to give it to me in one way or another.
And for you, Adolph, are you going to vote? Are you participating in this political climate? What are your views of this political climate?
Definitely I'm going to vote because I'm going to vote for the second time. So me voting this time around, I want change. And then with the political climate, you know, all these political parties, their manifestos, all of them, they are almost the same. But then I just need to decide which one I think is the one that they are going to deliver. Yeah.
Do you believe them, though? I must ask, especially as young people, you know, it's one thing talking about young people want this and the youth of the country do this, and we include young people so much in speeches and in rhetoric that we actually sit down and speak to you. So are you believing some of the stuff that you're hearing? Are you believing these manifestos that you keep hearing?
You know, these manifestos, they say they will deliver, but we all know that they are not going to deliver. Obviously, I don't believe them, but then on the other hand, they must make sure that they must implement those manifestos at the end of the day. Yeah.
Well, Professor, I mean, to you, as we wrap up this conversation, the issue around South Africa and the current political climate of the country, one may say it's robust, one may say that it's actually needed and it's indicative of a maturing democracy. When you're looking at the current political climate and where young people are specifically frustrated and even somewhat angry, how do you see us paving a way forward where we do address the injustices of the past, however, not using them as a crutch for corrupt activities in the future?
I think their hope lies with the youth as the new torchbearers. They are confronted with the sobering realities. They face the so-called limits to liberation on a daily basis. And if you put it into a perspective and you revisit the Freedom Charter, then you realize how little has been achieved. Yes, we have a certain amount of civil liberties, which we should treasure and we should cultivate them. But at the same time, I think especially the younger generation is also confronted still with the liberation fighters' mindset, which is pretty totalitarian. So also at the surface, while democracy seems to function, if you dig a bit deeper, you will realize it actually does not. My hope is that the younger generation, confronted with the sobering realities, discover new forms of definition what true freedom means, and that they start to organize and articulate themselves on that basis. They have to take over, they have to carry the torch, and I hope that they will add more freedoms and more liberties to the little we have achieved.
Very honest conversations that we're having this afternoon. Professor, I'm going to leave you there. Professor Henning Melber, who's from the University of Pretoria, and then my two young individuals, who is Adolph Mokonyama, who is an activist, as well as Rekgotsofetse Chikane, who is an author of Breaking a Rainbow, Building a Nation. Thank you so much to the both of you for joining us, and all the best. Come May 8th, and may your decision be the best decision there. Well,